everyone, my name is Krystale Lanzaderas. Right now we are going to discuss the species effects on ecosystem processes. Now we have our learning objectives. At the end of this discussion, the learners will be able to 1. Define biodiversity, functional traits, keystone species, and functional types. 2. Discuss an overview of species effects on ecosystem processes. And 3. Explain the 4 categories of effect functional types. So, what is the meaning of biodiversity? Biodiversity describes the variety of life across all levels of ecological organization. It includes 3 types. We have 1. Genetic diversity, which is differences in DNA among individuals. 2. Species diversity, which is a variety of species in a given area. 3. Ecosystem diversity, which is a variety of habitats, ecosystems, and communities. Next, we have the functional traits. Are the characteristics of individual organisms that impact their fitness through effects on growth, reproduction, or survival. For example, we have the loss of dominant conifers due to pathogen or insect outbreak, which alters microclimate and plant biomass strongly enough to affect most ecosystem processes. Now we have the keystone species are ecologically distinct from all other species in the ecosystem and has a much greater impact on ecosystem or community processes than would be expected from its biomass. Well, keystone species are also important for the overall structure and function of an ecosystem and influence which other types of plants and animals make up that ecosystem. Thus, in the absence of a keystone species, many ecosystems would fail to exist. For example, the sea otter, as shown in image, is considered a keystone species as their consumption of sea urchins, preventing the destruction of kelp forests caused by the sea urchin population. Kelp forests are a critical habitat for many species in nearshore ecosystems. In the absence of sea otters, sea urchins feed on the nearshore kelp forests, thereby disrupting these nearshore ecosystems. However, when sea otters are present, their consumption of sea urchins restricts the sea urchin population to smaller organisms confined to protective crevices. Thus, the sea otter protects the kelp forests by reducing the local sea urchin population. Another example of jaguar, as shown in image below, which is considered keystone species as they help balance ecosystems by consuming a wide variety of prey species. Another one example of sea stars are another commonly recognized keystone species as they consume mussels in areas without natural predators. In many cases, when the sea star is removed from an ecosystem, the population of mussels proliferates uncontrollably and negatively affects the resources available to other species within the ecosystem. Now, let's bound to the functional types. Are groups of species or patches of the land surface that share similar dynamics of matter and energy exchanges between biota and the physical environment. It includes 2 types. 1. Effect functional types, which effects on ecosystems. 2. Response functional types, which responds to environmental change. Nature flying bacteria, evergreen shrubs, and termites are examples of functional types that have predictable effects on ecosystem processes. Now we have the nitrifiers increase the mobility of available nitrogen in soils, while the evergreen shrubs produce well-defended leaves that have low palatability to herbivores and decompose relatively slowly. On the other hand, we have the termites mix the soil vertically and redistribute the surface litter to death. C4 grasses and fire-adapted species are examples of functional types that may respond predictably to specific environmental changes. As you can see these images on the left side, C4 grasses outperform C3 grasses at warm temperatures. To understand these pictures is that the C4 plants initially produce a 4-carbon molecule, which represents a warm season grasses, whereas the C3 plants involve a 3-carbon molecule that refers to cool season grasses. Therefore, both pathways have to do with the carbon compounds around which photosynthesis takes place. To clarify this statement, C4 grasses perform better than C3 grasses at warm temperatures, since the C3 grasses are best grown in cooler environments. Now we have the fire-adapted species survive and resprout rapidly after fire. This is a picture of an Australian bushfire incident. To clarify these pictures, the sprouts show that under the burnt bark so that the trees are still alive. But because the fires were so severe, it is likely that they needed a break in order to fully recover. As fires become more frequent, even fire-adapted tree species won't get the break they need. Here is an overview of species effects on ecosystem processes. These illustrations represent an expected relationship between ecosystem processes and the number of species, their relative abundance, and the type of species in an ecosystem. In Figure A, we have the effect of species number. That means some processes or stocks may increase as shown with increasing species number. Others may show an exponential decrease. In Figure B, we have the effect of species abundance. That shows the removal of dominant species from an ecosystem has greater impact on ecosystem processes than does removal of rare species. Similarly, we have the effect of species type, which reveals the removal of keystone species has large ecosystem effects, whereas removal of one species of a functional type allows other species in that functional type to increase in abundance. This compensation would cause only moderate impact on ecosystem processes until most species from that functional type have been removed. The arrows show the expected change in ecosystem processes in response to species loss. Species are most likely to have strong ecosystem effects when they alter the interactive controls such as resource supply or occurrence of disturbance that directly regulate ecosystem processes. So, there are 4 categories of effect functional types. 1. Species effects on biogeochemistry. 2. Species effects on biophysical processes. 3. Species effects on trophic interactions. 4. Species effects on disturbance regime. The first thing to know about the species effects on biogeochemistry. Biogeochemistry studies the distribution of chemicals that are of crucial importance for primary producers, often called with the general term nutrients, meaning to say that this derived from the composition of previously living matter by bacteria and fungi or from terrestrial runoff. Biogeochemical cycles involve the fluxes of chemical elements among different parts of the earth, from living to non-living, from atmosphere to land to sea, and from soils to plants. It includes two types: nutrient supply and nutrient turnover. First, we have the nutrient supply. Species traits that influence nutrient inputs or losses have important ecosystem effects. It is the introduction of an active nitrogen fixer into a community that lacks such species augments nitrogen availability and cycling. For example, we have an alpine snowbed species, as you can see this image above, from the scientific name of Corydalis conoriza, produces snow roots that grow upward into the snowpack where they absorb nitrogen that would otherwise flow downslope at snowmelt and be lost from the system. Another, we have an example of mycorrhizal fungi, also influence the quantity of nutrients that are available to vegetation. Absence of appropriate mycorrhizae can restrict the establishment of plantations of exotic forest species. And then we have a sheep. For example, in rich soils on hilltops where they bed down at night. Another one example of migrating salmon performs a similar nutrient transport role in streams. They feed primarily in the open ocean, then return to small streams where they spawn, die, and decompose. The nutrients carried by the salmon from the ocean can sustain a substantial proportion of the algal and insect productivity of small streams. These nutrient subsidies are transported to adjoining terrestrial habitats by bears and otters that feed on salmon or by predators of insects that emerge from streams. Second, we have the nutrient turnover. Species differences in litter quality magnify site differences in soil fertility. Differences among plant species in tissue quality strongly influence litter decomposition rates. Litter from low nutrient adapted species decomposes slowly. It's because of the negative effects on soil microbes of low concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus and high concentrations of lignin, tannins, waxes, and other recalcitrant or toxic compounds. So, this is an example of prairie grasses as shown in image below. As you can see this graph above, the experimental planting of species on a common soil shows that species differences in litter quality can alter or change soil fertility quite quickly. Early successional prairie grasses whose litter has a low carbon to nitrogen ratio. For example, enhanced net nitrogen mineralization rate of soil within 3 years compared to the same soil planted with late successional species whose litter has a high carbon to nitrogen ratio. Now we have the species effects on biophysical processes. When we say biophysical, it is the scientific study of biological processes in terms of the laws of physics. Phenomena such as echolocation in bats, the stresses and strains in skeletal and muscular structures are analyzed and explained in biophysics. It emphasizes the interrelations among biological systems and the physical environment. It examines how natural and species factors affect change in environments ranging from the high Arctic through temperate forests to subtropical deserts. It is the biotic and abiotic surrounding of an organism or population and consequently includes the factors that have an influence in their survival, development, and evolution. It includes two types. 1. Species effects on microclimate influence ecosystem processes most strongly in extreme environments. 2. Species effects on water and energy exchange influence regional climate. Examples of species effects on microclimate influence ecosystem processes most strongly in extreme environments. We have boreal mosses, form thick mats that insulate the soil from warm summer air temperatures. The resulting low soil temperature retards decomposition, contributing to the slow rates of nutrient cycling that characterize these ecosystems. As you can see this picture on the right side, we have an establishment of many desert cactuses. Often occurs in the shade of nurse plants. My question is, what are nurse plants and what do they do? A nurse plant is one that facilitates the growth of younger plants by creating an area underneath it for the seedlings to grow that is more favorable than its surroundings. While intuition may make you think that the area under another plant is not optimal for survival because seedlings would not get as much sunshine. You see nurse plants discussed most often in reference to those that grow in desert climates. As you can imagine, the shade is a major benefit of growing up underneath a nurse plant, but that is not the only way that a nurse plant improves the environment where the baby plants underneath it grows. When the nurse plant drops leaf or fruit, they add nitrogen and beneficial organic materials to the soil as they decompose, providing the baby plants with the nutrients they need to thrive. Hence, in hot environments, the shading of soil by plants is an important factor governing soil microclimate. Now we have the species effects on water and energy exchange influences regional climate, meaning to say that the height, rooting depth, and density of the dominant species in an ecosystem govern surface roughness, which strongly influences aerodynamic conductance and therefore the efficiency of water and energy exchange between ecosystems and the atmosphere. As you can see, these graphs on the right side represent the sensible and latent heat fluxes from deciduous and conifer boreal forests. To clarify these graphs, species differences in albedo and water and energy exchange can have effects that are important to the climate system. Take note. Albedo is the measure of the reflectivity of a material. If a high albedo means it reflects a lot of light, and if a low albedo means it absorbs a lot of light. Again, as you can see these graphs, conifers that dominate late successional boreal forests have a low albedo, which means it absorbs a lot of light and stomatal conductance and therefore transfer transfer large amounts of sensible heat to the atmosphere. In contrast, deciduous forests absorb less energy due to their high albedo, which means it reflects a lot of light, and transmits more of this energy to the atmosphere as latent rather than sensible heat, resulting in less immediate warming of the atmosphere and more moisture available to support precipitation. So, this is the end of my discussion. I hope this topic helps to gain better understanding of species effects on ecosystem processes. Then, Mr. Hackatin will discuss the other two categories regarding the continuation of the effects of functional types. Again, this is Krystale Joy Lanzaderas. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye!